Thank you very much. We have 4 representatives, the representative from four countries. I'll be serving as a moderator today. My name is FUKABORI. I am from the Educational Facilities Research Center, NIER. As to how we will proceed, as was mentioned in the first part of the session, based on the presentation made by 4 countries, we'd like to take up some issues that are common to 4 countries. So I'd like to name the countries. So I will nominate each country in turn. So please speak when you are nominated. And in the panel discussion, we'd like you to limit your comments in 3 minutes. In the second part, well, actually, we'd like to divide the second part in 2, first part and second part. In the first half of the part 2, we'd like to focus on the children's learning space. And then in the second half of that, we'd like to speak about the learning space for the faculty members or teachers. We'd like to spend about 40 minutes for the first part. Now, without any further ado, we'd like to go straight into the first part of the session 2. Here, I would like to raise sub-themes. I listened to the presentations and I decided to take up some issues. So I'd like you to have deeper discussions on some of the issues. First, how are you reevaluating the idea of gathering in school facilities to learn after the COVID pandemic? So what are the kind of the things that you bear in mind in building and designing facilities? First, allow me to speak about the situation in Japan. Based on how we dealt with the COVID-19, we re-examined and also realized the fact that it is a place for the learning. And also at the same time, we decided that it is a place for the social functions. So in the schools, it is possible for the students to develop their skills in the society. So we have to have the future-proofing the designs so that we have to re-establish and redesign the school facilities. And we have been working on it. So in the past, we had the lessons, the one-to-many, the lessons, and then at this point, we are now focusing and shifting to active learning, and in order to deal with the different needs for the diversified approaches. So first, we'd like to ask Aylan to speak about your approaches at this moment after COVID-19.
Sorry. Thank you for the question. In terms of, obviously, COVID-19 and the coronavirus was such a worldwide event at the time, and it's had a huge impact on our approach to school design. We've looked at, in Ireland, obviously the use of external teaching spaces is something we've looked at in our redesign. Now, obviously, climatically, Ireland has a particular type of climate, but you'd be surprised to hear, even though we get a lot of rain, you actually can get quite a lot of days where the pupils can work outside in external spaces, and also that we have covered spaces that are available for circulation and for recreation. In the classrooms themselves, we looked at improving ventilation on the technical side of it, and we introduced MVHR, which is mechanical ventilation heat recovery, where we recirculate the air, or we take the heat out of the air as it's extracted and also purify it. So there's a number of ways of dealing with it. Obviously, there's also almost a sort of an awareness and a kind of a cultural change within schools that was needed, which meant that there was more respect maybe for social distancing, and that we reduced the number of things like doors, for instance, into the older designs would have had doors into toilet areas. So we would have them as open spaces, so there's less opportunity to be touching and passing on germs. And I suppose it's not really directly connected to COVID, but the challenges in Ireland, we had a lot of challenges that came at the same time post-COVID, when we had all the Ukrainian refugees that came to stay in Ireland, which was great to have them in our schools, but that was a challenge as well in increasing the requirements for the capacity and, and making sure that there was social distancing. But I think we're quite proud of the way we've dealt with it in Ireland. It wasn't perfect, but I think given the speed of the whole event and the way it was dealt with, I think was very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on. South Korea. Could you make an initial presentation? South Korea, faced with their tremendous difficulties at the COVID pandemic, at an initial stage, students had to stay home, so they had to listen to the online lectures. Teachers and the students had to communicate via devices, and it lasted for a long time. And we have to say this could occur in the future as well. Against this backdrop, whether we have to question ourselves, is it ever possible to continue doing the online lessons forever? In other words, is the school facility really needed? That was a question raised back then. So for the schools and the school learning spaces, benchmarking was introduced. So many people started using the benchmarking activities for this. So back then, it was impossible for students to meet with their other friends. And in some cases, some of them are isolated, and they had no other choice but to spend time with only family members. And this was prolonged during the time of pandemic. So when we think about the values of that can be learned at the schools, how to live in the society, how to work collaboratively with other people, and how to be how to have empathy for other people. These values were not learned at that time. So face-to-face learning was considered to be very important. We realize that it is very important to go back to school and have face-to-face learning. And also diversity of the face-to-face learning is important. So again, there was the necessity emphasized for the creation of diverse environment. It should not be the traditional school or classrooms, but rather it is possible for the students to come to school and meet with friends, and they have communication with teachers. That's the kind of space and the environment and atmosphere that should be emphasized. People started talking about the need to create these new kind of schools. So this is not necessarily the existing schools, but rather it is important to create a school which is more friendly to students. That was the starting point. And then against this backdrop, we have to understand that online schooling could be a must in the future. So IT technologies and the mobile technologies should be exercised. So the textbooks should be based on the mobile technologies. So with that, there has been an institutionalization of the mobile learning, which is to connect textbook content to the online learning. And as was mentioned by the first presentation, the creation of IT space, and also the diversification of the kind of the space, and also support systems for IT education. So it is high time that we thought about this at this moment. By the end of this year, the research result will be submitted. So we would like to share the results with many people who are present here.
Thank you. Can we hear from New Zealand now?
Thank you for the question. Ackley and I work very closely in this area of COVID. As it developed, we didn't quite know, where it was going. New Zealand is a season behind the rest of the world, so it hit north and then it fairly quickly came down south. So it was galloping along, and schools are a really important part of our society. What we didn't want is for schools to become super spreaders, So you know, what do we do? It was galloping at quite a pace. So we set up an advisory panel of New Zealand's top air scientists from academia as well as scientific areas such as GNS and NIER, which are unique to New Zealand. We also researched or had research done through that group internationally to see what were the various solutions that other countries were looking at, and it was quite varied across the country, across the world. So through that research, we were just about ready to drop a new indoor air quality document out for publication. We held that back until we got their advice to ensure that we had the right ppm measurements, air changes, etc. And they advised we release that, and that has been a very valuable document, and it's been held in very high regard. So we were very fortunate to be able to put that team together super quick. So that's still in action. So we also tested and researched a whole lot using a school as a model. Actually had some extremely early mornings. We were trying to simulate cold. So I think you had a few 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning kind of events there, so that was really helpful. We also provided a huge amount of education and advice out to not only parents, but to schools as well, to give them the confidence of how to go back to school and how to try and better understand ventilation. We spent we dedicated a lot of money to ensuring maintenance. We did checks on all of our schools, and it's surprising how many schools over their lifetime have had interventions that may do things like put a double glazing window when something's deteriorated, but forget the fact that it's an opening window. So we located where we had dead air spaces, and we had the indoor air cleaners put into those spaces. We didn't want to overcommit to those and have a whole lot of electronic waste at the end of the day. Again, New Zealand being so far away, it was quite challenging to actually even get that kit through. So I think lessons learnt from that is that there will be ongoing viral contaminants. We're already aware of a couple that are out there. Kids are great spreaders of germs. Schools really support society to get schools open means parents can get back out to work, and that's a really big factor in supporting society. So we've looked at a whole lot more in terms of practical outdoor learning environments. We did find we needed to decant some rooms when the CO2 was too high. And we're we're probably encouraging that a whole lot more. So it might be a simple structure, structure flex, but it's a place where people can assemble outside. Obviously, when it's freezing cold, and we do have some parts of the country that are very cold, you've got to rug up. But so I think that was our learnings. And I think I probably covered that through. So going forward, it's ensuring that we have really good ventilation. That people do know how to operate it and the importance of that. Teachers are often busy, and I mean, back in my day, you'd have the likes of a window monitor. The other thing, in terms of from the perspective of an architect, is that a lot of windows that we have restrictor stays, and often in places where they don't need them, and that's a real limitation to airflow getting through the building. So back, we still have a code that would have been driven out of England or the UK, 5% of the floor area, and it's not a practical application for us. In our standards, we double that to a minimum of 10%. But even that, it depends on the configuration and the proportion of the window, whether it's a tall thin or whether it's a long wide, as to how much airflow you're actually capturing. So we added fans, and we had a number of practical solutions that we could put in very effectively, and some of them we would still use.
So thank you so much to the people from 4 countries. So what we hear is that there are some commonalities. First, so during COVID, you were not able to see each other. So the face-to-face education, how precious it is, people came to recognize the value of face-to-face teaching. However, you have to take some measures against COVID. So the ventilation or space between the students had to be expanded. And with the COVID-19, there's an interesting thing that is there's a new trend to use various spaces, not just classrooms. Korea said that we should not finish or the complete teaching just in classroom. We should use variety of spaces to teach children. So that was a new recognition. Now, let's move to the next topic. This relates to the first topic. So hearing at each countries, the learning activities are not just confined to classrooms, but it involves various other areas. That was a presentation from the countries. And when you think about educational activities, in the past, in Japan, teacher would use a text and she would unilaterally teach the children. But now we are using variety of spaces for education. So what kind of education is actually being conducted? And the corridors and other spaces are diverse. What are some of the things that you are careful about when you're designing spaces? And so in the same order that we did for the first topic, please, starting from Ireland.
It's a very good question. Ireland was an extreme example of cellular classrooms fully enclosed, where the teacher had a responsibility for the safety of the children, particularly for children under 9 years of age. Ireland has a litigation culture or a claims culture similar to the United States, where solicitors and lawyers will run after money. So the teacher had a responsibility, and what happened over the years was that within a classroom, toilets were brought inside the classroom so that the children could be very carefully monitored. And then over time, then a wet area for science and art came in. And then in about a decade ago, a computer area with hard wiring that was never used. So I referenced Finland and my work with our inspectors who are educationalists to look about breaking out of that box. The box of classrooms would back in history would have been to regiment workers to go and work in factories. Everybody was lined up in rows listening to the teacher at the front, whereas new methods of pedagogy and learning would suggest cooperative learning and self-motivation among children. So we broke out of the box, as I hope I demonstrated, and that leads to better independence and self-awareness, self-learning, building confidence of wandering from the class space out to the toilet, still within sight of the teacher. And I hope I also demonstrated that the circulation corridors, which were the fire officers, the fire authorities insisted would have limited or no flammable materials, that circulation area now became additional to this space available for learning, and it encouraged small groups of children to move out into informal learning in small groups for computer learning, for science, for art, and it's proven quite positive experience for the first few schools. So thank you very much.
In Korea, the birth rate is very low in Korea. That is the big issue and problem for us in Korea. But around 20 years ago, we have a lot of increase of children. Numbers of children has increased significantly and rapidly about 20 years ago in Korea. So therefore we had a shortage of the classroom back then, 20 years ago. But the numbers of students has declined significantly in Korea. So we are now trying to focus on the more tailor-made and the student-centered teaching or learning. And so therefore more personalized and children who can go through the experiences and project learning. And that more tailor-made and personalized learning is taking place more in Korea today. And in order to support such learning, we have different types of the classroom is now being built and is becoming more and more necessary in Korea. However, various type of functions and types of classrooms and different sizes of classroom should be available, are needed. However, on the other hand, by the central government and for the local governments, there will be some financial burden is too large for those governments, and financial issue is always a significant problem. So sometimes it is difficult to get the sufficient spaces for children or students. So to be able to utilize the space in more comfortable way, and also it was only used in the corridor before, now can be used for other purposes. So that can be those other extra spaces can be used for the learning purposes and for other purposes, so that we can efficiently and effectively utilize the space is quite important. There's a greater need of converting those spaces into the learning space. So therefore, the classroom where one can do the exercise, for the learning exercise as well as the other purposes, and to the relationship between the classroom and the space can be altered and converted into different purposes. And there's been more and more such initiatives, different from the typical spaces for the learning, conventional spaces, but rather to use spaces for other purposes to be used for the teaching as well, or learning as well. So as I have already introduced in my presentation, between the classroom and the corridor are connected, and these are more open and also variable, and the multi-purpose use and structure is possible in the hall, so that the different types of learning and some extra curriculum activities can be done, especially in Korea. As I have talked about as I've introduced, that the teachers are also involved in the design, and at the same time the students are also joining at the planning, so that the user participation type design in trying to make it maybe mandatory, and that is the registration that is going to be registered, where the user participated type of design, and to listen to the opinions of the users, and it's easier to do the management of that, and by engaging with the users. And so although there will be some side effect of having very similar looks of the classrooms, so how we can, various type of ideas need to be incorporated into the new type of classrooms. But in terms of education for students and listening to the opinions of the teachers need to be done, and how the design will be moving to, and that we need to think about. Thank you very much.
Question there. So in New Zealand, modern learning environments emphasise open and flexible spaces that extend beyond the traditional classrooms, albeit we do have some older stock that is a more cellular approach, and I'll speak to that a little bit at the end of this. So this shift is driven by research supporting collaborative and self-directed learning, as well as the need for multifunctional spaces that accommodate diverse teaching methods. Schools increasingly utilise corridors, breakout areas, and outdoor spaces for informal learning. As I mentioned earlier, we also utilise the outdoor spaces. When designing these spaces, considerations include acoustic performance, thermal comfort, air quality, and adaptability to different learning activities. Our DQLS document on indoor air quality in particular provide a framework to ensure these spaces do support student engagement and well-being. So in terms of spatial design, we would push cross-ventilation as much as possible, and we have a fairly established depth that we've tested and had evaluated to ensure that we can get that cross-ventilation, and we will push that wherever we can. Our spaces are quite volumetric, and rather than going for a model where there is a corridor, we tend to sort of introduce that corridor into the open space. There are other more repeatable designs we're using at the moment where we've actually got the corridor on the outside of the teaching spaces, so it's quite sort of affordable. It's covered and it needs to be designed in an area where it is sheltered, obviously, from driving wind and rain, but that's a very cost-effective way to manage that as well. So in the older buildings, interestingly, I mean, we're really pushing a lot of retrofit of buildings. Don't just pull them down. There's carbon measurement and all of these sorts of things, and carbon responsibility at the end of the day. But our older buildings, you know, sort of push through to the business quite a bit that they were designed in a time when there was a lot of viral disease. There was TB, there was all sorts of other things. So they were quite, you know, I think it's not to be underestimated, the high-level windows that are there that work really well in terms of passive ventilation. So we found through the exploration that we did through COVID, ensuring that maintenance was funded and undertaken. One of the simple mechanisms was to actually have window winders. For some reason in New Zealand, the window winders were removable and clearly removed, probably in pockets of kids, goodness knows where they went. But we found a chap that made them, and so we just put them in, made sure all the windows were opening again, and we actually got excellent cross-ventilation, and at times that was also applicable to the situations where we did have corridors. So I think for us, we're fortunate to have good wind flow around the country and good, clean, quality air, so that we make the most of that where we can.
Thank you very much for your comments. Professor Nagasawa, Mr. Nagasawa, maybe I think would you like to add anything? I think you have already made some presentation, but do you have any additional comment in this topic? Professor Nagasawa. For this question, I think there was a good question. There was a very good response to your question. That was a good question. So because of the COVID-19, instead of being contained in a box, you can, but actually that was actually increased the infection. So therefore ventilation is very important. And also the students also need to be outside sometimes. And actually that the outdoor can be a good learning experience and venue. And that was the opportunity to be able to become aware of that through COVID-19 experience. And I think that is awareness being brought to the students as well as the teachers, and that would provide in trying to create the good, more comfortable learning space, and ideas can be generated. As a result of that, the learning classroom and corridor, these spaces in the school, can be utilized as a learning venue, and those people who stay there and spending a longer time. So the outdoor space can be used as a learning space, as not only just to do the exercise, but as a learning space that can be used for.
In other words, I have difficulty portraying this, but we started out as an emergency measure at the time of COVID, but that was just a starting point, and we were able to realize certain possibilities. So that would lead to the richness of the activities and learning and education in the peacetime, in a way. So that I think is important, and this has been highly evaluated in many parts of the world. And in Japan, at the time of COVID pandemic, we tried to come up with a new way of living, and COVID-19 was a driving force for schools. So for the schools and education, we were now able to come up with the new way of utilizing spaces, learning spaces. So that was a starting point at which we were able to learn about how we are able to be creative. So that was a very difficult time, but we were able to drive and also thrive on changes and thrive on the risks. So I think everybody was equipped with the potential, huge potential, and we tried to develop students, and this has resulted in the collaboration with the local community. So that was the engagement of everybody around the schools to be involved in the teaching. That's something I learned. Thank you very much, Professor Nagasawa. He had a very good summary. So I'd like to supplement what he just said as the wrap up. At least in Japan, at the COVID-19, it coincided with the time of the introduction of the GIGA school, which was one device for each individual. And maybe it was a very good opportunity in which we were able to realize the provision of the personal computers to each individual. The COVID-19 is already a history now, but we are able to make sure that everybody is able to utilize the personal computers. So as long as people have these computers, they are able to have the Wi-Fi connection. So for this symposium, we invited many of you to the schools in the Tokyo, and then there was a queue about the group activities, and then some of the students went out of the classrooms and they were able to form a group. So that was just a coincidence, and we were able to look at the situation where there are very diversified schools. So the corridors are now the formal teaching the space or learning space. So COVID was certainly the tremendous threat, but still we were able to utilize that as a starting point for good opportunities, utilizing GIGA School project. And then I'd like to move, the time is running short, I'd like to say just one more thing. Listening to your presentation, from my point of view, based on my own learning, the experiences, school was the place for learning. So the schools were established, facilities were established to make sure that there is the place for people to learn and to be educated. But now it is a place for the people to live. So that means that the students are able to spend time even in the breaks. They are able to enjoy their lives. So are there any things that you have in mind? So are there anything that you have in mind in order to make sure that schools are the place for the living, not only for the education, but also for living? Please.
In relation to the projects in relation to design of school facilities and places for living, is that the next question? Correct? Yeah, we very much, as you can take from the presentation, we have a large number of post-primary schools constructed and designed, and I think we are very much have a rising demographic in our response in relation to the post-primary school levels, and that is a challenge for us. In addition to that is particularly in urban areas, and what that is relying on us to actually be very creative but also challenging for designing schools at post-primary but also primary levels in urban context, and that is resulting in campus projects, as I would have given some examples there. And with that, having the actual learnings, like what was mentioned there about post-COVID, I suppose, was the effects of that isolation during COVID and the benefits of face-to-face learning, but also face-to-face engagement. And I think everybody can appreciate the success of that. And then that is really asking the question about the opportunities that schools are within the communities, and that's obviously the recurring theme here today in many of the presentations. And so certainly with current designs, as I've just outlined there, the schools at primary school level, we have access for sports halls, for activities and outside of school hours, access for local communities. But particularly at post-primary level, there's larger opportunities for that within the multi-purpose rooms. But now what you can see is our designs are developing about the adjacencies for the those general purpose areas, which is for congregation of the students and for teachers and multi-purpose, but also it's been linked with the sports area or multi-purpose area. So now you have the possibility for very much these extra large spaces that support events, social events, like we have seen in Korea there. There's some elements with the tiered seating, and there is examples there of music and orchestra recitals and things like that. So definitely you can see that benefit for the students, but also those activities for communities outside the school hours. And I think that is really raising the question of what we're going to use or try and look at the schools, particularly in urban environments, because will be developing and designing schools at primary, post-primary, and also special schools. So we need to make sure that those structures and infrastructure, public infrastructure, is optimized to best of those communities. With that, there will be challenges in relation to management, but these are things about developing, and we have to overcome that. So I think it really is asking the question, in Ireland, are we doing enough for our school buildings? And we certainly want to develop and optimize that going forward.
Then Korea, would you like to make some further comments? Thank you for your question. As has been already introduced in my presentation materials, allow me to make some additional comments. In South Korea, in designing schools, we make sure that this is a living space. So we give consideration for the elementary school, for example. So we visited the elementary school yesterday, and I was able to see some similarities between Japan and South Korea. For example, they could have the nest of the birds, or maybe the caves, and the students would be able to rest or play with other students, maybe in groups. And also in the corridors, they had the pocket space. So they are able to establish a space. The same holds true with South Korea. We are doing the same thing. And also in the halls and also rock lockers, we re-established these areas. So as was mentioned earlier, we tried to come up with the benches. So students will be able to sit down, and also students are able to sit down on the floors, and also multi-purpose stairs. This is also very good. This is for the resting and also to enjoy their lives. So these are the increasing cases in South Korea. To draw a conclusion from here, in the past, we had dedicated spaces for the resting space, but we decided that the people would be able to go to many places so that they are able to enjoy their lives in any place. So everybody has an access to many places. So it's easy. It has an easy access, and it's quite easy to use. So that's something that is increasing in South Korea. And also after work, after schools, and many families are double income. So it is important to have the post-school, caring space in schools. Sometimes it is difficult for schools alone to deal with that. So in that situation, this kind of care is provided by the local community or also the cities or villages. So that's the kind of operation that we have after schools. Thank you.
New Zealand, please.
Thank you very much. That's a very good. The question you've asked is very awesome. And I'm saying is great because we know children spend a significant amount of their waking lives in schools. If we look at the time a child is in school from 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. to maybe 2 p.m. or 3 p.m., about 6 hours, if we calculate that, it translates to about 25% of their waking lives. And as such, it means that the learning environment should not just be a place to learn, but also living spaces. In New Zealand, our school facilities are designed to have what we call a holistic environment. By so doing, I mean environments that nurture the students, their physical and their social well-being. I mean environments that help to promote their health, their comfort, and by so doing, would enhance learning. And we do this through ensuring, as we showed in our slides, ensuring good indoor air quality and thermal comfort, which would help to reduce the spread of airborne infections in schools. We do this also by ensuring good acoustic environment to promote communication. We do this also by ensuring good lighting to ensure visual comfort of the students, as well as ensuring green spaces and outdoor learning that supports both active and passive recreation. We also design our schools to ensure cultural inclusivity, because in New Zealand, we are a multicultural country, so we need to embed that as part of the design of school buildings. Finally, another aspect we also aim to achieve is sustainability and resilience. Aspects such as energy efficiency and aspects such as climate responsive designs for our buildings to respond to things such as flooding or earthquakes thereabout. By so doing, we put an holistic lens to school design to ensure an holistic environment for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nagasawa Sensei. So, do you have anything to add besides your presentation? Are there anything to add to this session? Yes, hearing Akuri-san's presentation, I was impressed. Holistic environment should be secured, and also Ii-san said that school is not just a place for learning, but schools also support society. And during the COVID-19, we had, it's not just some people that felt that, but everybody, I think, felt that that same thing. That school exists thanks to society, and thanks to schools, we can have men and women participate in the society. Schools enable the relationship in the community. So we were able to become aware of this during COVID-19. And I think we should utilize our lessons. In Korea, they have school complexes. So not just refurbishing the existing facility, but they are cost conscious, but they make the complex into a meaningful project. And in Ireland too, and in New Zealand too, I think they presented that same kind of thing. So we've all felt the valuable values that schools provide, and not just the ideals, but we want to realize the schools. That's really valuable. There was some talk about asset management, and that also impressed me. Thank you so much. So, school is a place for learning, but it's also a place that coexists with the community, and we have to also enhance the value of the school. So how do we realize all that after COVID-19? So we talked about I think we'd like to close the first topic, children's learning space. Let's move on to the second topic, space for teachers and staff. There are some materials from each country, and we'll change the order. Japan will present first. They'll talk about the background of taking this topic. So yes, this is the Japanese material. The background to taking this topic is that under the international standard, against the international standard, Japanese teachers have long working hours, and also less people want to become teachers. So MEXT is thinking about the educational reform, and the priority is teachers' working style, how to have more effective, efficient working style, and also how to raise wages and to make teachers' work more attractive to everybody. So when it comes to the teachers and staff environment, Japan is always thinking about how to design a space that is very good for teachers. So Professor Nagasawa also joined this study, and in Japan we have some ideals for space for teachers and staff. There are 4 functions for this space for teachers and staff. And depending on the situation, these functions should be improved or put priority on. So let's introduce the Japanese situation. The first function is it's a place for each teacher to do his or her work. So we need a space where teachers can work. In Japan, there is teacher's room where all teachers gather, and there's a desk for each teacher. Before the ICT was introduced, this is a typical teacher's room, and the desk is not necessarily big, and there are so many documents on the desk. So I don't think this is an attractive workplace. But now there's more ICT introduced in the teacher's space, so you don't need so much space for each teacher. And maybe we don't have so much documents anymore.
So that the ICT will be progress more, and it will be drastically changed where the paperless work will be initiated, so that there will be less and very little documents. And then now next, the number 2 is the venue or the location for collaborative work. Because teachers may move in Japan based on the grade of the students or based on the subjects, but how teachers, we also require space where teachers can talk to each other. How do we proceed? For that purpose, at a workstation where we can have some separate meetings, and then there'll be those workstation where tables for the meetings and chairs and copiers are available. And when one in Japan in the junior high school, the teachers will become the teacher in charge for particular subjects. So therefore, they'll be prepared for that in the space. Next, in addition to that, we also need some resting place or the refreshing place. In Japanese staff or the faculty room, there's no such space usually, but this is more recently a newly built school. In the corner of the teacher's office, the staff room, there's be some refreshing corner with the refrigerator and small kitchen space. When at times, teachers also may need to take a break, and where teachers can drink, and maybe we are a little bit behind other countries. I wish to hear such a refreshment space for the teachers, and examples of that from other countries. And I don't think you would have that in other countries either. But in case of the girls' clothes changing space, we also have a space available for the female students and female teachers, because for the teachers with the timing of sometimes in a not so good physical condition, especially the teachers are pregnant and so on, and so there'll be resting space where one can lie down. This is not the general space, but just in the corner of the clothes changing space, a room, and that there's a space like that. So that is the future, perhaps, issues that we need to build these type of spaces more at schools for the teachers. The last one, the fourth one, the venue to have communication with children and students. And that is in Japan, faculty staff, there'll be sometimes the confidential information, so students cannot enter the staff room or the teacher's room. However, if this consultation corner is available, where they can casually chat with teachers and so on, there'll be some corners like this within the room of the faculty room, or outside of it, there'll be some consulting space where just they can chat with the students in front of the staff room. So that we can have more communication opportunities to talk to students. And this is based on that. I hope that this will have more of these kinds of spaces. And that is somewhat our wish, is the staff room that it need to be built as well. So that is also like to know the situation. So most likely, I think I'd like to ask the Korean representative to speak about these topics, please, from Korea. In Korea, at one home, the numbers of children, recently, we have reduced numbers of children, because in a family, only 1 or 2 children. It used to be 10 kids in a family, but nowadays it's only 1 or 2 children. And for teachers, those child these days are quite spoiled, so they misbehave in front of teachers. In other words, lack of social aspect, because in the old days, teachers were like people want to become teachers, but these days, a lot of young people do not want to become teachers, because that is some profession that people want to avoid because of that. I already mentioned about some budget issues or financial issues with schools, but we need to change the spaces to provide and to change the learning spaces. But what about the staff room? Where do I have money? That would be seen as a luxury if we can change and improve the staff room. However, but we should not demotivate these teachers, because they need to be engaged with students, and otherwise they would have an engine to work with, and also infringe on the learning rights. I personally think that it's very important to value on the space for teachers, and that is very important as well. And we need to improve on this, so that the teachers can spend their time at school in a more comfortable way, like improving on the staff rooms and so on. and it's in very perhaps similar to Japan. This is the situation we are facing today. In Korea, what is we are focusing on right now is among Korean teachers spending their time at schools, and also almost like a cafeteria where people or teachers want to be there, and the children or students can play with teachers. What about creating those spaces where there'll be interchange or exchange between the teachers and students? Then this would help in increasing the communication between the students and teachers, and that would result in a much more positive results to promote communication among them. So that I think we need to utilize some spaces available, and it's to make it a better space than any other commercial facility that we would usually see outside of a school. And the staff room space need to be more advanced, and so that the business discussions or the teachers can talk about their teachings together, or teachers' meetings can take place, and also to have some just relax and healing space for teachers. And those type of the social consensus is now getting more and more. That type of social consensus is being done in very similar to the example shown by the Japanese schools. But in the past, just like in this picture, we have so many documents spread around in the staff room. But now it's becoming, with the paperless activities, that's reduced numbers of spaces. Now with paperless is the increase of spaces and less documents. And then there's the resting rooms are connected with the deck. It can be used as a meeting space as well as the healing and resting space as well. And for the meeting room, it is just like the general office space and meeting rooms, and there's a multi-purpose and can improve the quality. And there are schools like having these spaces now available in some schools. So this one, as I mentioned earlier, each teacher, the high schools, or the staff room and the resting space, compared to it's a very good quality space, much even better than the general coffee shop. And then when they have the visitor, this is also to be spent as receiving some guests. And this is open. It is not just open to students, but also for teachers. Both teachers and the students can come here and do the communication. And the teachers, that is also a consultation room within the staff room. This is a consultation room with students. And it's a very clean space. And there's the meeting room is connected with a consultation room. And there's also hot water is available. So it can generate more like a family-like environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, Ireland, please. Please show the presentation material of Ireland, please.
First of all, I might just establish from a teacher's perspective at a primary school level, classrooms are for the whole class. So obviously the teachers have a dedicated classroom at their primary school or elementary. And in the high school or post-primary school, the teachers are allocated classrooms based on their subjects. So it's very much from a preparation perspective, the classrooms are the key support for teachers, which is possibly one of the key elements of how I suppose our staff room may differ in relation to Japan. Because as you can see, we touched on the guidance documents. This is a snippet from that, and as you can see in this is about the staff room is very much social. It should have social and work areas, and it's the ratio of 2:1. And I think from the drawing there, you can really get the indication, the impression of social furniture, but also the optimization and also the use of tea stations for recreation space is certainly a key part of this, but also then your desks in relation to seating areas for eating and recreation is a key part of it. Next slide, please. And here for you have example of some completed schools. The large image here is a school in the Midlands, and you can see it's very much an example of where the furnishings itself can vary from various schools. And in this instance, you've got a very good mix of the dining spaces at the very end, supported by a tea station, as we call it, for the use of the teachers in the staff room, but it's also supported by relax lounge furniture. And I think it's one of the things you'll see is definitely it's that response to that sort of ratio is very important. Obviously access to Wi-Fi and data points are a key part of it, but maybe not for the intense purpose of the teachers for the preparation, but it can support that when required. The other slides over here is very much another school that was due for completion and then in practice. So you can see it's very much optimized for that recreational space as opposed to a working environment. And I think that's very important, as you can get the impression there from the staff's well-being. But I think it's very much based on the support of the classrooms themselves and the teachers' access to that for their preparation. And I think it's definitely we're in that transition of not paperless yet, but we're very much the introduction of the digital and ICT is a key role. But you can see certainly in the future that's the direction I think everybody will be going. Next slide, please. Is another example of a post-primary school locally in Tullamore, where the Planning and Building Unit is in the Midlands. And in this instance, you can see it's very much the furniture mix is something that is, we give grants out for the schools that they supply a lot of the furniture themselves. So they are actively involved in picking it, I suppose, for the best of their use. So you get a variety of response to that across the country. But as you can see, it's very much facilitating I suppose, the collaboration of teachers at all grades, I think, is an important part of it. And the staff room is a very successful space to get away from students when required, but also to engage socially and take that time out, I think, is very important. But in addition to that, if we go to the next slide, please. We also have access to support spaces, and these are pastoral offices located around the schools at post-primary level. And again, these are multi-purpose spaces, but used for the teachers. But they can also engage with students or smaller groups. So again, it's just taking that pressure off the staff room, and I think it's very much practice. But also the schools themselves, they use those. In slightly different approaches from management's perspective. But again, it just supports the overall collaboration for staff, but also for the students alike. In addition to that, next slide please, is then general meeting space. And one of the elements here is very much from the gathering of the teachers, whether it's for planning, it's more group work, but also for students, but particularly like New Zealand, we're very much a devolved approach within our schools. Board of Managements are a key part to the success of our school sector, and facilities for them to come together regularly for the operations and management of the school is a key part of it. And you can see the general meeting room and access to tea services and things like that is also a key part of it. So again, it really just does take the pressure off the staff room. And I think it's something that, having seen the examples here today, seen some of the common or some of the issues arising, but how important it is for teachers to have their opportunity to have their space individually, but also as a staff member themselves, I think is important. And then lastly, it's just we have first aid rooms and photocopier rooms. Sorry, next slide, please. Again, just taking some of that pressure off. So I think, but just one thing to add is, while teachers in Ireland, we have a slightly different problem in relation to retaining teachers, but it's from a housing crisis, particularly from the cost of living and rent in especially urban areas is becoming a challenge for us for retaining teachers. And that's very much in the cities, and it's just something that we'll have to overcome in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just one thing, I'd like to confirm one thing. This is the island case. So in the case of elementary schools, the teachers' workspace is based on the classrooms. So, for example, if you are responsible for the 1-1, then you have a desk. So basically, the teachers are required to work there, and then also other people also, the students also will gather around. Is this the kind of understanding?
Class timetables are up. Very much the staff teacher will remain in class and do their preparation, do the results for that day, but also for the next day. And access outside hours is important for that. So I think it does very much take the pressure off.
I would just like to add that the classroom at elementary or secondary level is the place of work. The staff room is the place where the staff recharge themselves to go back and teach effectively. In contrast to the UK might have a staff room for each faculty, or the arts, languages, science, and whatever. But in Ireland, there was an insistence from our educational inspectorate within the department that it was important that there would be a single staff room so that the principal teacher, the vice principals, deputy principals could mentor new staff and recharge more senior staff. So there's a collegiate approach to the challenges that can arise. It's a place for discussion and sharing rather than a work desk. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Lastly, I'd like to ask the New Zealand to say a few words. Please show the material of New Zealand.
As much as we use the classroom very much for our teachers to use as their workspace. So in New Zealand, most teachers use a desk in the classroom as their main workplace. This workplace is within the main classroom area, and it's not always sectioned off. At times you'll see teachers, they will kind of, create a little barricade around them, but that's typically not the way that it's intended to be. Our teachers use laptops, which they can connect to larger screens. So sometimes in secondary schools, teachers have shared office spaces that might be linked to their classrooms, but there's a few pictures up here on the left-hand side of the screen of some fairly typical sort of spaces. We are working on paper reduction, I'd have to say, but they still need storage for resources that are often used, be it art or crayons or books and various things like that. So that is still a factor for storage. So item number 2 up to the right of the screen is collaborative work. In addition to the space for individual work, many schools have spaces for collaborative work. So these spaces often double as a resource storage and prep areas. So there's a couple of examples up there. The lower one, that's a fairly new school, so at the floor area, as you can see, it's still got boxes. They're still in the process of settling in there, but it's got floor area for additional teachers as is needed. If we can go to the next slide. So to the left of the screen, we have space for refreshment. So this is our staff room, and so that is the place where our staff, our teachers, can go and relax, have their coffee, have their lunch. It's a social area, so they all have it has kitchen facilities, so they can have their lunch there, refreshment breaks. They're also used for staff meetings quite commonly. And they'll have large tables that can be used as a place to work collaboratively. And from a design positioning, we tend to like staff rooms to overlook playgrounds, so there is that oversight of the playground in those breaks. So on the above me on the screen here is space for communicating with children. So New Zealand schools don't always have separate areas for communicating with students outside of the classroom. Sometimes libraries and other communal areas are used, and some secondary schools do have meeting rooms or principal or other senior leadership team offices that can be used. Newer schools often have purpose-built breakout rooms within the classroom area that can also be used for this purpose. So the breakout rooms are often for the multiple reasons that are sometimes neurodiverse needs. You know, it's a quiet, calming area. It might be an area to go and just focus, but teachers can also use that for meeting rooms within their classroom. So that's probably about it from New Zealand in terms of that staffing provision. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we heard from 3 countries. And I think there is something that's missing in Japan, and that is the classroom is, this might be exaggerating, but the classroom is like a battleground for teachers to really be with children. So they need to relax, and they need to recharge. The Ireland use the word recharge, and really for teachers to refresh. I think we need to have that kind of perspective in Japan too. Because of time, I think we'd like to close this topic, and maybe we can accommodate 2 or 3 questions from the audience and take up those questions. So anybody from the audience, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I am from Shibaura Engineering College. My name is Mori. So my question may not be in accordance to the topic of the panel discussion, but I'd like to ask each country the learning space, to create learning space in an efficient way. That has been a long time topic or challenge. And hearing your presentation or panel discussion, you talked about taking space between students and also to secure air quality in the classroom and indoors, and also safety, and also environmentally friendly design. Also a space for effective learning. Like if you are to change a design guideline, what is something that you would really focus on? You can list maybe about 3. So if there's going to be a change of guideline for design, what would be a good thing that what could come up as a topic for change? Please, thank you. Let's see, from each country. So let's start with Ireland. Do you have any answers, if you can?
I can answer, yeah, while you're thinking about that. For us, it's definitely finding a repeatable model that works across the board. So, often we have very constrained sites, but we've often got sites that are quite clear. So to find a repeatable design that is measurable in terms of its carbon, of its indoor air, its lighting and its acoustic performance, and to be able to roll that out, ideally to get a scale of economy, that would be that's something we are driving for at the moment.
Thank you. Korea? I don't know if this will answer your question, but in Korea, for school facilities, there's a special protection. So there is a law regarding a safety in educational facilities. In order to make schools environmentally friendly, so there is a certification of whether the school is ecologically friendly. And there are a lot of certification system in UK. There's BREEAM, and also there are certification system in US. So, but in Korea we have a law to secure safety and ecologically friendly certification. So when a school is built anew, they have to meet these standards for safety as well. School needs to get a certification. Well, you talked about having a new guideline in order to have an effective learning space. In Korea, the most focus is IT. How do we create a school for IT in an effective manner? There's research going on in this area. So I hope that the result of the research will be included in the new guideline. Ireland, do you have something else?
Sorry. Thank you. One of the areas that we're looking at specifically in terms of our design guidance updates is in relation to whole life carbon assessments. You probably know the EU Energy Performance Buildings Directive. So Ireland, being part of the EU, has produced a climate action plan, and we're mandated to produce whole life carbon assessments on our projects, all public sector projects, including schools. And as you know, whole life carbon is both operational carbon and embodied carbon. So on the operational carbon side of it is the use of energy and the carbon emissions relating to the heating, the lighting, etc. And then the embodied carbon, as you know, is in the actual materials and the carbon emissions in relation to that. So we're doing a lot of work on how we give guidance to our design teams, and it's in parallel with the public sector in Ireland and under the EU directive. And it's sort of a balancing act, I guess, between optimizing the financial side of it, because also one of the biggest elements of carbon in our school buildings is concrete and cement, because it's a very high emission. So we're looking at how can we reduce that. There's the possibility to use things like CLT, cross-laminated timber, using glulam timber sometimes, but there are some areas you just can't avoid using concrete. So is there ways to optimize the engineering of the concrete to reduce the structural design of that? So there's a lot of work being done at the moment, so that's one big area of our design guidance. Maybe just the other second one, there's a few of them, but the other big one is we talked earlier about digitalization and the introduction of BIM, and in a way that goes hand in hand as well with the whole carbon topic, because if we can make a more efficient design from a digital point of view and from a BIM point of view, we can also reduce our carbon emissions.
And I might just add to the success of that, it takes many of the items that you would have raised there. The design must be efficient, space must be efficient, but also the design of the structure must be lean. It's getting proportionate response to that. And I think one of the things I take away from this is about re-looking at the designs, taking all the ingredients that need to be considered, and the challenge is to get all those to respond to what we require for inspiring learning environments, for active and successful teaching spaces, but also the cost, but also the embodied carbon. Once you have to factor all these elements in, it really is looking at the future and seeing what the designs will respond to that. And it's getting that right and it's proportionate, I think, is very important.
Dear Mori-san, you asked a very difficult question. When I was here 12 years ago, the topic of the symposium was near zero energy buildings, and working very closely with building services engineers, we focused on reducing the cost of energy. And I know after the Fukushima tragedy in this country and the oil crisis, and everybody was focused on reducing the cost of heating and air conditioning school buildings. And one thing I think we lost sight of for a while was the air quality, and New Zealand has emphasised that. And I think that was the big gain out of COVID, was that we realised that merely using a CO2 sensor just as an indicator of the air quality, not as a measure of the infection in the air, but it gave you a good indication that there was very poor air quality in many classrooms. And we've, in the last few years since COVID, investigated MVHR, mechanical ventilation heat recovery, which can ensure the parts per million of CO2 and other contaminants can be controlled. So that would be one good positive out of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's one more person. If there's a question from the audience, we'd like to entertain one more last question from the audience, if any. Okay, no questions. Okay, then lastly, I'd like to move on to the summary of this presentation. So from each country, one person, I'd like to ask each person to make the last comment. For the future planning for the learning well-being improvement for the teachers and the staff, and also for the children, for the school environment. So your final last comment, please, from Ireland. Let's start.
Yeah, I think it's been very informative. It's very eye-opening. I have to see, having seen the examples, and say the common challenges, but also the benefits and the fruitful work of everybody and the engagement, it really takes away in relation to our current standards, our current operations, but also our designs. And I think it's very much going back. We'll be reevaluating. We're at a pivotal point in relation to where we are on our design journey, in relation to our overall approach, but also when you factor in all the learnings, as you say, from everything we've spoken about today. And I think it's in the next 5 years, we'll certainly see the benefit, looking at the journey ahead of what we have to develop. And I think it's the sharing experience, and I certainly think the opportunity to review this again and perhaps take the outcome in the future would be very much a benefit for everybody. And I certainly think that when we go back, we'll certainly be evaluating so many elements, and we are in that process of all these ingredients being progressed at many levels, and it'll be successful in a number of years' time. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Next, Mr. E from Korea, please. Well, so thank you very much. I'd like to make my comment very short because of the time constraint. More recently, open style school is now becoming more popular in Korea, especially these sometimes, however, these are well utilized but not well utilized in some cases, according to my study, because all the spaces need to be provided in an appropriate manner, appropriate places, appropriate spaces should be provided. But and according to my research, that was not always the case where it is well utilized, where in schools, in the school architecture, we may be just misusing the space. How can we efficiently use the space, utilize the space? How can we impact on the better and also improve work on the emotions as well for the students? And I think further verification, further research and study will be needed. But in the future, in Korea, useful experience space and open and also appropriate to be suitable for students to provide the learning opportunities, and so that they would provide very active, to generate more positive attitude among teachers. And through this symposium, I've learned a lot from the experiences and from different countries. but our initiatives to engage in trying to improve the learning space for the students is a very good hope for the future. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Japan for inviting us over to come and look at Japanese schools and to be a part of this symposium. So, arigato. And we have learnt a lot that we will be taking back to our country and reflecting in the work that we do. I think something that is very important that we all have to remember is what we build today is the infrastructure for the future. We're delivering long-lived assets. So we have a huge challenge in our everyday work when, for example, there is huge technology advancements and we have a climate crisis on our hands that we also need to respond to. So the way we build our assets now is so critical. I really resonated with the points earlier around putting the well-being at the heart of our designs as well. Especially for us in New Zealand, our mission is to provide world-class education without barriers. So making sure that the well-being of every student is in our designs and in our school property is critical. We want to make sure our education supports students to be productive and innovative members of society in the future. So for us, that's making sure we're delivering warm, safe and dry, quality learning environments that are digitally enabled and, really importantly, are adaptable and resilient so that these long-lived assets can keep changing with future requirements so our children can learn the skills they need to be successful in the future. I think that's going to come down to continued collaboration like this symposium, working with our communities and researchers and experts in the field to really understand the future that's ahead of us. So thank you very much, arigato again, for having us here today.
Thank you very much. Lastly, Professor Nagasawa, could you tell us about the Japanese situation, and also please give us a wrap-up for the entire discussion. We listened to presentations by these three countries, and we were able to have very good summary, so there is nothing to add about this symposium. The theme of the symposium is how to create spaces for diverse activities for children, teachers, and staff in schools. So here we talk about children and also teachers and staff. So this is a place for learning and the education and also the place for life. So based on this subtitle, we were able to understand the theme here. And based on that, you talked about many different things. So we are now thinking about the architecture and also the facilities for schools, which is future-proof. And then it is impossible to ignore the community. So I was thinking about this myself. And from these countries, participating countries, where we're able to hear a lot about the involvement of the local community in the school as a part of the local community. So for this theme, we were able to hear a lot about their engagement in the local communities. So I was very much impressed. Schools are located in each community. So this is not only for the children, but also the school is for the community. And I understand that many of you have been working on many new things, and you have many new objectives for the post-COVID era. And for that, we were able to learn a great deal, and it was a great eye-opening experience for many of us. I'm quite sure that many of you who are in the audience have been able to learn. And then that should be the starting point. In what way are we able to realize our goals? In trying to realize all these, then sometimes we have to be stuck with the monetary restraints or the funding shortage. And also some of the facilities are very much antiquated, and in what way are we able to deal with them? So we are bound by many limiting factors, but still our aspiration should be high, and we have to try to be creative in realizing our goals. Each country has its own context, and many of you have been trying to be very creative in tackling with the problems in your context. So this creativity is something we are able to learn from, and we have to try to share this kind of aspiration. And so in Japan, we have our own context, so it is important to deal with the situation on our own way. And I'm sure all of you are looking at your own context and try to take on the new challenges. So again, the most important is the collaboration. Maybe in the future, we'll be able to have this kind of a symposium in which we will be able to share the history or outcomes. Thank you very much. I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation to all 4 countries. So with this, we'd like to close this panel discussion. Thank you.